Today we're going to do a first on the channel. I'm going to do a Throwback Thursday knife review. So these reviews are going to be of either knives that are potentially no longer in production, or at least knives that I got years and years ago, which maybe are still in production but have gone through different iterations. But basically these are knives that I've had for quite a while. And so when I thought about starting this series of reviews, there was really only one knife that I could start this series with, and that is the Buck Crosslock. So this is a knife that has been around for a long time. I'm not exactly sure when it was introduced. It's really actually hard to find detailed information on this knife. It's just been so prevalent for so long, I don't think anybody really kept a lot of great records. Now, I do know that it won Knife of the Year in 1994, so I know it's been around at least since 94. I know that I got this knife sometime in the 90s and probably the early 90s. This was actually given to me by my cousin. He had it and carried it, and it was the first exposure that I ever had to a one-handed opening knife. A knife with a thumb stud that you could flick open. Before that, I'd only had old Buck or old timer or case, just regular pocket knives or lockback knives, but they were knives that you had to, manually open them up using like a little fingernail groove right here or whatever, and then they were locked back or even just slip joint style knives. So this was my first exposure to a one-handed opening knife, and he let me just play with it for so long that I was just sitting there flicking this open, and I was wearing calluses on my thumb because it was my first experience with what we now call a fidget knife, right? A fidgety knife. And that was just that smooth opening. Now this knife, we're talking early 90s. So this is a 30-year-old knife, and I've never done anything to clean it out or oil it or anything like that other than just rinse it out or blow it out. But I've never taken it apart. I'm honestly not sure how. You'd have to have a tool there to do that. I've never taken it apart. I've never done anything with it other than just kind of rinse it out and let it dry. And this thing is still one of the smoothest opening knives that I own. And for a knife that's that old, to be able to say that and has that much use, because I have used this knife. This is a hard use knife. You can see the wear on the blade as far as the wear marks. You can see here the point's a little more rounded, where just from years of sharpening it, it has just had, all that use and wear on it. You can see here where when I was sharpening it, I actually got on an angle where I kind of ground a little bit off of the thumb stud there, but actually didn't hurt because that thing was so rough it tears up your thumb if you sit there and flick it open and shut, for a long time. This used to have Crosslock like stamped on this rubber insert, and of course that's worn off just from my hands over the years. This knife, I'm telling you guys, I'm not even a huge Buck fan. I'm not a fan of the fact that they use 420 steels, even if it's the 420 HC by Buck, is supposedly decent steel and all that. I'm just not a fan overall of Buck knives. I have a couple of them. I have a fixed blade. I have this, maybe one or two others, but generally I've stayed away from Buck. But this is still one of my favorite one-handed opening knives. As old as it is, and as much as we've improved that category, and we've, got all these ball bearing action pivots and all this other stuff, better steels, I just really do enjoy this knife. And honestly, I'm not 100% sure what steel this is made out of. I know roughly around the time this came out, around the time in the early 90s, I believe, is when they started using their 420 HC. It's possible that that's what this is. I don't remember being aware of the 420 HC at that time, but looking online, it seems like that's about when they started using it. This could be 425M, which is what they supposedly used before they switched to the 420 HC. Either way, it's a decent steel. It's not great, but again, it was a product of its time, right? When you're talking early 90s, late 80s, we didn't have all the super steels available in knife blades that we have today. And it functioned. Yes, you had to sharpen it. When you used it hard, it would dull and you had to sharpen it. But I have sharpened it so many times, and there's still plenty of blade left here. It's not like I've lost a ton of steel. So basically just touching it up is what I would be doing for the most part. And I believe I still have this thing fairly sharp. It feels like it would shave. I don't know if I have any paper here to test that theory. I haven't sharpened it in years. I haven't. Oh yeah, look at that. So still very, very sharp. No problems with that. So you can definitely get it razor sharp. It'll stay that way, you know, for a good long while. If you're doing light use, if you do heavy use, you are going to have to go ahead and resharpen it because it's not the best steel. The design of the knife, so you can see it's very plain, almost like a bullet-shaped handle. It feels fine in the hand. There's nothing wrong with that. They got a little bit of jimping here, but honestly, it does no good because it's recessed, and so your thumb doesn't really grip it. It just slides along it. You've got your clip is not reversible. You know, you're only looking at a tip-down carry, right-hand carry. The clip is very functional, though. It works well, nothing fancy. There's a lanyard hole in it. Honestly, the big appeal to this knife is the action and the one-handed opening. This was, I think, one of the earlier forays into liner locks on a large production style knife. You can see this thing engages kind of in a weird way. It goes all the way over to the other liner, to the point that it almost makes you think there'd be some danger of this thing collapsing on you because that liner lock actually going to the other side of the blade. You know, a lot of times people talk about like, you know, 30% engagement or 50% engagement. This is like 100%, and I'm worried about it being 101. You know, it's it's going all the way to the far other side of the blade. Now, obviously, I've used this a lot, and I've never had it fail on me. So you know, there's that. This is, I believe, the model they called this was the 180. In fact, I know it is because you can see it. I don't know if you can see it. I've not, again, cleaned this thing, but right inside the liner lock there, it's kind of hard to see. But it actually says patent pending, and then it says 180 on it. So this is their 180 model, Crosslock. They came out with some models after this one. This was just a single blade. They came out with some models that had a blade on either side, so you could like rotate around, I believe, and flick the other side open. Most of them had a single blade like this, and then they would have a couple different options. There was serrated blades, there was a saw, there was a almost like a gut hook, but I think it was meant to be for seat belts, but it was a sharpened hook. They had a couple different options. I never really got any of those in hand. I've seen them, you know, just wherever, magazines, online. At the time, it would have been magazines, not even online. This predates my use of the internet. So this was, you know, this was a great knife that I carried basically through my childhood and teenage years. Again, this was a gift from a cousin who just saw how much I loved playing with this thing. So he went and bought himself another one and gave this one to me. And so I really appreciated that. And to this day, I really like this knife. It doesn't get a lot of use anymore because I just have so many other knives. But the fact that after 30 years is still just fun to flick that thing open just says something about it. And I don't know, you guys, does anybody out there have memories of the Buck Crosslock, know any of the other history about it? Has anybody carried or still carrying this knife? I don't know, but if you can find one, if you can find a used one that somebody is selling for a decent price, I would 100% recommend that you pick it up. No hesitation whatsoever. If you got a good deal on a used one of these blades, pick it up. If nothing else, it's a piece of history in the knife world. It may not have been the first one-handed opening knife or the first liner lock, but it was one of the first that gained the kind of popularity that it did. And again, like I said, 94, I believe it won Knife of the Year. So it was considered innovative for its time. I know where I grew up in Texas, one of the kind of markets for this knife was in the rodeo world. You know, having a knife that you could open one hand and get out quickly and deploy has various different benefits when you're in the world of rodeo. So, but that being said, this is just, it really is a great knife. I've got a lot of nostalgic value to it, obviously. Growing up using it, playing with it, getting it as a gift from a cousin. But absolutely love the knife. So for Throwback Thursday, the first knife that I wanted to feature on this series, it had to be the Buck Crosslock. Great knife. Pick one up if you ever get the chance.